Hi, this is Doug Kay, and I want to let you know that I still have a few slots open for my photo workshops in Cuba, November 2016 and January 2017. If you'd like to join me for a workshop in Cuba and get to know the people of Havana, head on over to dougkay.com/workshops. That's Doug K, Kaye.com/workshops, and I hope to see you there. And up next, Gordon Lang and I discuss the Nikon D500 on All About the Gear. Hello, this is Doug Kay. I'm here once again with Mr. Gordon Lang from Brighton, England. Good afternoon your time, Gordon. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good morning, your time, Doug.
It is, and I do have the requisite second cup of coffee, which will get me through the show. Thank you very
Actually,
much.
we're in adjacent rooms. We just make up this time difference to sound exotic.
You must be. You have a San Francisco mug there again. So
Exactly. Oh, no, there's the clue.
I know exactly where you are. Okay. We'll get the pronunciation down eventually.
Let's do the pronunciation first, shall we?
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking to you about the Nikon D500, and you're going to be asking me about the
Nikon D500. So, we've got both models covered, right?
Yes.
There are two versions of the camera, one for the UK market, actually one probably for the US market, one for the rest of the world. Although my friend Martin Bailey refers to it as Nikon 2, being an expat Brit in Japan. So, okay. So this is an interesting camera. It's, the D300, the D300S were cameras that came out a long time ago. And I think people expected that there would be an update to that line much earlier than this. In fact, didn't a lot of people speculate that the crop frame, the APS-C sensor line of Nikon had sort of fallen by the wayside, at least the semi-professional versions?
Yeah, so here it is. This is the D500. And as you said, it is, technically speaking, a semi-professional camera. That's only really because it's not a D5 or a D4. It's not one of those giant bodies with a built-in battery grip. In every other aspect, this is a professional camera, and it does, in fact, share a great deal or a certain amount of very important features with the flagship D5 that coincidentally was announced at the same time in January 2016. But as you say, the thing that makes the D500 really special is that it's a camera that many of us thought would never exist. Now, if we rewind quite a few years, well, it's actually 6.5 years between the announcement of the D500 and the model which preceded it, the D300S. 6.5 years. That is like dinosaur timescales in the digital camera or any kind of technology industry. Enough time for us all to think that Nikon had abandoned the idea of a truly high-end APS-C, or as they call it, DX format body. Now, if we do go back to the D300S, it was kind of quite simple. There were many different APS-C or DX format bodies, from entry-level ones that's now covered by the D3000 series, mid-range with what we now call D5000 series, upper mid-range D7000 series, and then the semi-pro line where they kind of went for much tougher build quality, faster continuous shooting, things like sync ports, PC sync ports for external lighting, features that really high-end enthusiasts or professional photographers were after. And those categories managed to coexist quite happily. But about 1 year after the D300S was announced, Nikon announced the D7000 as its new kind of upper mid-range camera. And they put an awful lot of technology into this camera. Sure, it wasn't quite as tough or quite as fast as the D300S. I can't quite remember whether it had the PC sync port for external lighting. I don't think it did. But it had so much else that it was this massive success. And I think Nikon sat back and was slightly surprised by this and thought, well, we're glad it's been very successful, but is there actually any need for a higher end body? And as time went on, I think they wanted to encourage people to make the leap to full frame, especially as they started doing more affordable full frame bodies. Because back then, a full frame body was very expensive. But then they had models like the D600 came along, which made full frame more affordable. Obviously, since then, Sony has made full frame really affordable. And the idea of a high-end, sports-oriented APS-C body has kind of fallen by the wayside. And Nikon left it completely open for Canon to take over that market with the EOS 7D And then years passed, still no response. So Canon did the EL7D Mark II. Lot of time passed, still no response. Throughout this time, I should say, there were constant rumors of a D400. Everyone was thinking, what could a D400 have? Let's make up some rumors. But then, at the beginning of 2016, Nikon came along and said, here's the new D5. And hey, look, here's its little partner, the D500. So the semi-pro, or rather compact professional DSLR is back. And this would probably be an ideal time to ask you, Doug Kay, how much does this camera cost?
This camera it's an interesting price point. In the US, it costs about $2,400. And that puts it quite a bit ahead of most of the competitive cameras, the crop sensor, APS-C cameras. I want to give a quick comparison to some of the cameras you mentioned now. We'll cover them later. But the Canon 7D Mark II is only $1,500, so it's quite a bit less. Now, this is somewhat apples to apples because we know that cameras are released at their full price, and fairly soon this camera will probably drop to roughly $2,000 at some point, let's say. But still, it's quite a bit more expensive than the Canon. And compared to the D7200, which is the current 7X model, that's only $1,000 or $1,047. So it's less than half the price of this. So I'll be very interested to hear from you what that difference is between the D7200, which is also a crop sensor camera, and the D500. So anyway, $2,400.
Well, first of all, is that $2,400 price with or without a lens? Is
That's
that a body
without
price?
a lens. That's just for the body.
So that makes it probably, if not the most expensive APS-C body around, because that's more expensive than the Fujifilm X Pro 2. It's way more expensive than a Sony A6300. We're always going on about how expensive the A6300 is, but it's half the price. You know, it is. It's more expensive than its nearest rival, the 7D Mark II. It is not a cheap body. I should say that Nikon are also selling it as a kit with this lens. It's a fairly new lens. It is a DX format lens, obviously. It is a 16 to 80 millimeter. So far, so normal. That's a 24 to 120 equivalent. But the focal ratio is quite bright. It's f2.8 when it's zoomed wide, and it's f4 when it's zoomed long. So that's typically, you know, almost a stop faster than most other lenses of this kind of zoom range. And it is a really, really nice lens. Good quality, but again, it makes the overall price of this camera even more expensive. So I think the first thing to note is to not think of it as spectacularly expensive compared to other APS-C bodies, but amazingly affordable compared to the D5, because this really is like a mini D5. Think of it as a more compact and affordable version of their top-end Pro body, in which case this camera looks quite affordable and light and small in comparison.
The D5, just for comparison, the body alone is $6,500 in the US. So this is well less than half the cost of its big brother.
I'm going to do the too long didn't read or too long didn't watch summary now to just tell you what are the headline features of this, and then I thought we could go over them in a lot more detail one by one. So it's got a brand new 20 megapixel APS-C sensor. This sensor has not been used before in Nikon's line. It has the same autofocus system as the D5. That is its big selling point. It has 153 AF points, 99 of which are cross type. I'm going to go into a lot more detail on that in a minute. It shoots at 10 frames per second, and it has an enormous buffer, especially if you fit it with an XQD memory card, because it has twin memory card slots. It takes XQD, which are very, very fast, and it also takes SD. It has a large viewfinder. It has a large screen on the back, which tilts. It is fully articulated. Well, not fully articulated. It's vertically articulated, and it's also a touch screen, which is fantastic news. I'll be demonstrating that in a minute. It takes 4K video. Take that, Canon. This does 4K video. And the last thing in the feature roundup is it's one of the first cameras to feature Nikon's new wireless technology, which is called SnapBridge, and I'm really looking forward to telling you more about that. So should we start with the physical side of it, Doug?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as soon as you pick up this camera, you feel very, very confident. I mean, it is a heavy camera. It's a large camera, especially if you're used to shooting mirrorless like I am. I'll just show you. This is the Olympus OMD EM1 here.
Which is so cute. It's demure.
It's fairly large for a mirrorless camera. But look, here is the the D500. I mean, it's massive compared to a mirrorless camera. It's big compared to a lot of DSLRs, apart from things like the D5. So it's a very substantial camera, but it's built like a tank. It's weatherproof. It's everything proof. I've not dropped it on the floor, but if I did, I fear for the floor rather than the camera. Now, there are a few clues on this. If you're familiar with Nikon's bodies, there are a few clues here that tell you that this is not in any way a mid-range camera. It is one of their professional cameras. And the first clue is that it does not have a mode dial. Instead, like the higher-end models, including the D300S, you've got a mode button up here. And the idea is you hold it down like a shift key and you turn either the finger dial or the thumb dial on the back, which, by the way, feel fantastic because Nikon knows its ergonomics very, very well. And that allows you to cycle through the options, of which there are only 4: P, A, S, and M. There are no effects. There is no fully auto mode. There's no miniature mode or anything fun like that. There are 4 modes because this is a very serious camera for serious business. You'll also notice at the top here, buttons for the quality, the white balance, and the metering. Again, you hold them down as you turn the dial, and that's how you adjust them. You can see what you're doing on this giant LCD screen on the top, another differentiator with their mid-range products. On the back, you'll notice here's something new, which I'm very pleased to see. There is a little joystick here for adjusting the AF area. Now, if you're a Nikon file, you will say, but hang on a minute, isn't that what this little rocker pad was for? And yes, you can use the rocker pad instead, or as well as. This also still adjusts the AF area, although this still also navigates the menus, whereas this one up here, this joystick, is only for adjusting the AF area through the viewfinder. Now, the buttons that run down the side, this camera is also designed, it's laid out to be very familiar to people who are, say, shooting with the D5. The idea is that you'd probably, if you're a professional sports or wildlife photographer, you'd have the D5 as your main camera and maybe this as a backup camera, and you'd be able to switch between them seamlessly. These buttons are very similar across both bodies, but the one thing that I would like to note is for the first time on one of their DX format bodies, these buttons here, these buttons on the top, are backlit. And when you twist the shutter collar here to light up, to backlight this screen so you can read it in the dark, these buttons light up as well, which is really nice because if you've ever shot in the dark, a lot of one of the biggest challenges is you're just jabbing at all the buttons. Where's the play button gone? Where's the whatever button gone?
Yeah, I mean, having been a previous owner and user of a high-end Nikon camera, I can say that is really a great feature, and I have used it many, many times. So I'm glad to see that on this camera.
Yeah, and you can also see if you turn it to the side and you think, again, it's been a while since I've reviewed a DSLR, so it's always nice to come back to them and think, the body's so deep. Yeah. Look how deep the body is, because of course the mirror inside it, but it means that you can get all of these ports on the side. It has a microphone and a headphone jack, as you would hope. But also, if we have a look up here, there's the USB port. It's not just a mini USB port, that is a full-size USB 3 port, so nice high speed. Down here is the HDMI port, and as you can see, it's a larger one. And Nikon includes a little kind of collar that helps keep it in, which is showing that they're thinking carefully about how, say, people who are into movies shoot with their cameras, maybe with an HDMI cable coming out to an external screen and recorder, and you don't want that falling out with a little plug. You want a nice big chunky plug that you can lock in. So that's nice. And if we look over on the other side, you can see the twin memory card slots. Now, Nikon has been into twin memory card slots for ages, so that's no surprise. One at the top is thicker, bigger. That's for the XQD memory card format. I don't have an XQD memory card, so I can't tell you much about it. There's an SD slot below it, which is what I've been using. Now, XQD is faster, and it can clear the buffer so fast on this camera that you can actually shoot something like 200 RAW frames in a burst. 200 RAW frames!
That's quite remarkable. I don't know of any other camera that will do that. Do you?
No, and that's one of the things, even if you're shooting with an SD memory card, its buffer is significant. I mean, you can just keep shooting with this camera. One of the other things you'll notice that differentiates it from Nikon's mid-range lineup is around the viewfinder. First of all, you have this little circular kind of hood covering, but you also have this little switch. Can I flick it here? Flick it out. And you'll see, there it goes, little window. If you're doing long exposures, I don't want any light to come in through the viewfinder and spoil that. That is something you'll only find on the higher end models. If you had something like even a D750, which is full frame, you'd need to put a little cap on it and you'd clip it in. So these are all clues to tell you. Also, there's no pop-up flash. These are all clues to tell you that this is a pro body. Yeah, sure, camera reviews describe it as semi-pro because it's not the kind of full grip size, but this is a pretty serious piece of kit.
Yeah. Your reaction is interesting because, like you, I'm using and reviewing mirrorless cameras all the time. And when I went back after quite a long absence and picked up a full-size Nikon, on the one hand, I said, gosh, this feels really good. It's just got a marvelous feel. Everything is so solid. And then I said, oh, gosh, this is really heavy,
Yeah.
So that's the good and the bad of this.
I mean, I also wanted to show you, while I was gathering stuff to show you in this video, I picked up my Sony a6000, which is obviously a tiny camera, but it's an important one that we will come back to because it does shoot very quickly. It does have very good autofocus, and I'll be comparing them later on. But here it is. This is my a6000 with Sony's 70 to 200 millimeter f4 lens. You can see this tiny body on the end with this giant lens on the front. Now, this lens is designed to deliver an APS-C imaging circle, a 70 to 200 millimeter focal length and f4 focal ratio. In that respect, here is Nikon's equivalent. This is their 70 to 200 millimeter lens, f4. Although, it's not. They're both full frame lenses.
Yes,
sorry,
right.
So they're both full frame lenses. So in terms of their imaging circle, it's a full frame imaging circle that they're doing. But look at them; they are, of course, roughly the same size. So in fact, the Nikon one is ever so slightly smaller in terms of the barrel diameter. So yes, the mirrorless cameras are smaller and lighter, but once you start putting big telephoto lenses on them, and anybody who buys a D500 is going to be putting a big telephoto lens on it, I expect, then the size advantage does begin to reduce because, if I'm shooting sports with this camera, this is the lens I use. And when you put this on top of a D500, sure, the combination is still bigger and heavier than this, but less so than when you're comparing them with their general purpose lenses. So you've got to kind of put it in some context.
Yeah, and by the way, one of the things you notice when you pick up a camera like the D500 is it's got this something that's very unusual to both of us, and it's an optical viewfinder. And again, you with all of our concerns about the various electronic viewfinders and which ones are good and which ones are bad and all the problems, there's something very reassuring, isn't there, about going back to an optical viewfinder?
Yeah, now you say that there's pros and cons to them. I mean, this is a Nikon optical viewfinder, so it embraces all of their technologies in terms of being able to overlay an alignment grid and information like that. Not as much overlays as, say, Fujifilm's hybrid viewfinders have, but still, there's plenty going on there. The beauty of an optical viewfinder, as any DSLR owner will tell you, is that it gives you a bright, real-time view. That's slowed only by the speed of light. The light comes through the lens, bounces off a mirror, through a prism or another mirror. This is a prism. And then out the back. And that process happens effectively instantly. So you get instant feedback when you're panning, you're following stuff. It doesn't become noisy in low light. There's no reduced refresh rate. There's no shimmering as you glance across it because it's got the wrong kind of panel technology. On the other hand, you're not overlaying a live histogram. You're not having customizable guides. You can't frame movies with an optical viewfinder, or you play them back in bright sunlight and examine them through the viewfinder. There's pros and cons to both technologies, but in terms of where this viewfinder does stand in the whole scheme of things, it's one of the largest that you'll find on an APS-C DSLR. It, of course, has 100% coverage, but it also has 1x magnification, which is a little bit more than the Canon 7D Mark II. Now, they've already factored in the DX crop, the field reduction, so in full frame terms, it's like describing it as a 0.66 or 67 times. There are bigger views on some full frame cameras, but I'm not complaining. You look through the viewfinder here, it's a massive bright view, and it looks lovely. Yeah. And the nice thing is that what I've found when I've been shooting mirrorless is that because it's showing you a kind of preview of the exposure, it's very easy to see whether your picture is going to be under or overexposed, and I correct that before I've taken the picture. When you shoot with an optical viewfinder, you don't have that same feedback. And when I've shot with lesser cameras, lesser DSLRs, sometimes I'm surprised at how the picture comes out. It's a lot brighter or darker than I expected, and I need to correct for that. However, Nikon's metering in this camera has become so good that you don't have to worry about bad exposures with this camera. It just gets them right. And it also can employ things like face detection. You can turn that off if you want. But if it's on, you can, if the camera detects a face and it's like the primary subject in the frame, it'll focus for it, it will expose for it, it'll adjust its white balance for it. And this is all happening even when you're framing with the optical viewfinder, simply because the metering sensor is so high resolution and so sophisticated. So I had absolutely no errors at all with this camera in terms of metering.
Let me clarify something. So this camera does face detection, but not in live view mode, but in regular?
Yeah. In fact, they've been doing it for some time. DSLRs have been able to do this for some time because their metering sensors, which are active when you're using the optical viewfinder, have got sufficient resolution and sophistication to actually be able to employ face detection now. Now, when you're framing through the optical viewfinder, you don't see a square over someone's face as you would when you're composing electronically, but the camera still knows inside. It still will recognize a face. And the higher the resolution of that metering sensor and the greater its sophistication, the better it does it. So you don't see the box when you're framing around someone's face, but it is still recognizing them if you've got the feature turned on, and it does a great job at metering for them. So they've been doing it for some generations now, but this one does it better than ever before.
That's interesting. When you use that, do you view the actual focal distance through the lens when you're taking the picture? In other words, let's say you're shooting, the camera decides to focus on a face that's fairly close to you. Do you see at the point you take the picture that that's what's in focus?
Yeah, because remember, through the optical viewfinder, you still get a display of which AF area it's going to use. And if you're pointing it with somebody dominant in the frame, you would hope that it would select them. This is in the auto wide AF area mode. If you've got it on a spot, a single AF area mode, it'll focus where you tell it to. I'm talking about when you're saying, camera, you decide based on the scene. So if you're letting it decide of all of its AF areas and it sees a person, it will focus on them. But it's using feedback. The clever thing is it's using feedback from the metering sensor to actually perform face recognition, which is pretty smart stuff. Even if you don't see it actually happening, the end result is that you look at your pictures and the person's in focus, which is ultimately what you want and metered for correctly.
Well, very good. So this is a perfect segue to let you talk a little bit more about the autofocus in general. I think there was more to say about this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nikon has always been very good at packing on more AF points than Canon has, and it's really gone for it here. So it's developed one AF module for the D5, and they've deployed it in the D500. It has 153 AF points, right, which is a lot. 99 of which are cross-type, so they're sensitive to more complex patterns. And importantly, most of those, not all of them, but most of those points are sensitive to -4 EV, which is very low light. Now let's compare that to the Canon 7D Mark II. It has a 65-point AF system. All of them are cross-type, but it still has less than the Nikon's 99, and it's sensitive to -3 EV. So the D500 has a broader and denser AF array that is also sensitive to lower light conditions. So it's better in every way. But for me, the most important aspect is that broader aspect. Now, if you look through the viewfinder of the EOS 7D Mark II, you'll see that it's not just a little diamond in the middle that has the AF areas. It's actually quite a large rectangle. It extends almost to the edges. Not to the top edges, but to the side edges. It's quite a large array. But on the D500, it's even bigger. Remember, this is an AF module that's for a full frame camera that has been squeezed into a cropped DX APS-C format. And as a consequence, its AF area now covers almost the entire sensor. Width-wise, they go right up to the edge, which is fantastic. Height-wise, they don't quite touch the top and the bottom, but they get pretty close. So it's spread out all of those AF areas across a massive area. And some of those ones at the edges are cross-type sensors as well. So there's a very good chance that wherever your subject is on the frame, it will be able to get an AF point over it and be able to focus it very accurately. I'm going to stop talking about specifications now and actually go straight into anecdotal evidence because I went out shooting with the D500 earlier this week. And the 70 to 200mm f4. Sure, it's not an f2.8, I'd have preferred that, but this is what was available to me at the time. So zoomed to 200mm, 300 equivalent, and opened, of course, wide to f4. I started trying the different AF modes on this camera. Now, there are, of course, a whole wealth of zoning and reduction options where you can choose different groups of AF areas. But for me, one of the most exciting AF modes on Nikon DSLRs, it's been available for some time, but it keeps getting refined, is their 3D tracking, because it just works amazingly. Now, this starts off with a single AF area. And what you do is you put it on your subject and you half press the shutter release. And from that point on, that subject is stuffed because there's no way it's getting away. The camera will track it all over the frame and just keep it in focus, whether it's coming towards you, away from you, wherever it is. And of course, because of that really broad array on this camera, it doesn't matter where it goes on the frame. You feel quite relaxed when it starts getting towards the edges, because you don't have to think, I'd better actually adjust the composition here because it's going to soon not fall over an AF point, because it is going to fall over an AF point, because they're virtually everywhere apart from in a little strip along the top and the bottom. And I was shooting cyclists, absolutely no problem. Jet skis, no problem. And I thought, right, birds in flight, they're always a bit tricky. And we've got some very cheeky seagulls here at the seaside in Brighton, and they change direction very erratically, very quickly, especially over the pier when they're looking out for snacks, chips in particular, from the tourists. They're always snatching stuff. Do you know, one day I had a whole pizza, a whole like 12-inch pizza. So you can imagine me, I was like, pizza. And the mouth was open, it was in my hand. I kid you not, this bird flew down and picked up, because they're big when they're right up to you, picked up the whole pizza and flew off with it. I couldn't believe it. And you and I have had pizza together, Doug. You know I love my pizza. I imagine how upset I was. This happened 2 years ago. I'm still upset about this. So there I was on the pier just a few years ago.
Did it have pepperoni?
It did, actually.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that explains it right there.
If it wasn't, the seagull wouldn't have been interested.
Exactly. Right.
Well, Quattro Formaggi, it would have gone, oh, no, not for me. That's the one. Get him. So I was, there's this quite interesting looking seagull that was quite close. So I thought, right, I'm going to follow him. So I get him in the middle of the frame. I get the AF area positioned over him. I only have to do it for a split second, half press on the shutter release, and it's tracking him. And I think, right, let's check the burst size. So I start, I'm going to press the shutter release down. It's firing at 10 frames per second, like this, for ages, because I'm just shooting JPEGs. And it's flying back and forth, it's decelerating, it's accelerating, it's doing all of this stuff. And I'm managing to keep it in the frame. And then suddenly it dives down. And I thought, well, I'm just going to follow it. So I follow it dives down, and then it swoops back up again. It dived down into a crowd and then swooped off. And I just kept shooting the whole time. And I thought, well, let's have a look at those pictures and see how they look. And I went through them, and of course, they're all in focus. You know, there's no problem at all wherever it is. They're all in focus. But then I got to the interesting bit where it dived down. And what had happened is it's actually spotted a donut from a tourist. It swooped down and grabbed a donut out of a girl's hand, just as she was like this. So it's grabbed it, and it's flying off, and the girl's like going, and I've got it, and it's all still in focus, and there's people behind and people in front. It's a very complex situation that the AF system has got to deal with, and it just dealt with it seamlessly. Now, there is no way that I could have done that manually. There is no way that I could have been prepared either through speed or through anything else. It would have been pure luck to get that right. But just the technology in this AF sensor is incredible. It was just so easy for it to follow it and just get it all in focus. And that's just one example of how this camera, and of course it's shooting at 10 frames per second the whole time. The buffer isn't filling up, it's tracking perfectly, and you're able to follow the action very easily through the viewfinder because it's an optical viewfinder. That is the big benefit of DSLRs over mirrorless cameras. Sure, with the A6300, Sony has now got this kind of quite interesting thing where it kind of shows a semi-live view. If you slow it to 8 frames per second, it actually is a still image, but it is what's happening right now. It gives the illusion of live feedback. It's very smart. But it had to slow down to 8 frames per second for it. This will continue to do it at 10 frames, and it's easier to track it. It was just, you know, if you're into sports or wildlife shooting, and this is basically the conclusion that we're going to come to in about half an hour's time, this camera is an absolute dream to shoot with.
Yeah, I've shot with the D3. I've shot with the newer cameras. Nikon's autofocus is arguably the best that's out there. And I've spent a fair amount of time shooting high-speed aircraft coming right at me, going overhead, going away from me. And the number of images that's in focus is extremely high. And I've not used even the 6300, the Sony A6300 doesn't really come close to the speed of Nikon's high performance autofocus. And to repeat something you said earlier, this is the same autofocus system that comes from the D5. With the, as you said, the added benefit that because the sensor is smaller, it covers a larger percentage of the sensor area.
So basically, so yeah, this is with the D5 is the camera that all of the sports professionals are going to be taking to Rio for the Olympics. Right? That's the camera they're going to get. Now, if you can have the same autofocus, albeit at only 10 frames per second, if you get the D500. So in that respect, you've got this amazing AF technology, and it just really works.
Very good. So how does this work does it work with the touch screen?
Right, so let's have a look at the back of this camera because as regular listeners and viewers of All About the Gear will know, I'm a big fan of articulated screens. So first of all, I'm going to show you again, this screen tilts actually a little bit more than all the way up, although that's probably how you'd have it. And interestingly, when you tilt it down, normally it would only tilt by about 45 degrees on a lot of cameras, but this one will actually tilt 90 degrees. It'll face all the way down. It doesn't come out to the side though, but this is, fine for most people. It's a 3.2-inch screen. I'd like to give a little nod to the panel, because it is not VGA resolution, it is XGA resolution. This is a 1024 by 768 pixel display, which is very, very high resolution for a screen on the back. Most screens on digital cameras are VGA, which is 640 by 480, so it is a lot more detailed and everything looks very smooth. But the really exciting thing for me here is that is a touch screen. Now, remember, Nikon, on the one hand, love to embrace some types of new technology, but are also very wary that their core audience can be quite traditional, so there is no swiping through menus here. If I switch the camera on and go into the menu system here, you will see that the screen does nothing at all. Nothing at all. Unless you're entering copyright details, in which case a little keyboard does come up and you can, thankfully, because that would have been daft, you can tap your name out. But here's the weird thing. I was doing it earlier, Doug, and I just couldn't spell my name. I thought, what's going on? Am I a bit tired? Which I am, but the keyboard isn't a QWERTY keyboard. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And that's really hard to type on an A, B, C, D, E, F, G keyboard when you're so used to QWERTY. So it took me ages to type Gordon Lane Camera Labs. But I managed it in the end, and at least it is touch sensitive. But when you go into playback, you can, and this is quite hard for me to do this as I hold this up to the screen here, but you can swipe through images. You can tap to enlarge, you can pinch to zoom, do all this sort of stuff. So you can use it in playback if you put it in live view. Let me do that now. You can use it to, oh, look, there I am. You can use it to tap to move the AF area, which is really what I want to use a touchscreen for in the first place. Sorry, that's not too many reflections on that. And you can use it to pull focus in movies. Now, one of the things you might have noticed there is that the focusing in live view and for movies isn't particularly quick. This is the major differentiator between the Nikon lineup and the Canon mid-range to semi-pro models, is that Canon has dual pixel CMOS AF. This is where it can actually magically turn some of its pixels into phase detect AF points and back again, allowing it to have much more confident, smooth auto-focusing. And it's driving lenses that have got very quiet focusing motors. Nikon's not really bothered with any of that. It's a contrast-based system, and unfortunately the lenses, while they are quick and fairly quiet when you're shooting stills, normally when you're in live view in movies, you can kind of hear them going zip, 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 like this as they focus. And it's not very confident. It does hunt a bit in live view and again in movies. So you can pull focus with the touch screen, but you'll hear it going zip, 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 zip. And that kind of spoils the experience a bit. So like other Nikon DSLRs, generally for movies, you put it into manual focus, and for live view, you're going to be using it for considered. You're not bothered about the zip, 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 zip when you're framing up a landscape or an architectural shot, but you're not going to be using it for quick response street type stuff. I remember I took a D750 to the Lewis Bonfire Parade, which is a fantastic bonfire march that happens in a little village near where I live. And I thought, great, I've got an articulated screen. I can flip it out and shoot in live view over the heads of crowds because it was like a march. But as you tried to focus in live view, it was going zip, 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 zip. The person had gone at that point. So I couldn't shoot with it in that situation. If you do want to shoot in live view over the heads of crowds with an articulated screen, it is better to either go with a Canon or a native mirrorless format. That is the only real weak side of this camera, though.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned we've been talking about the Canon 7D Mark II. It has that marvelous dual pixel autofocus technology, which is great for video. How does this camera otherwise compare to the Canon and others in terms of video?
Well, it's interesting. The 7D Mark, well, in fact, all Canon DSLRs, apart from the latest 1DX, will only film at 1080p. And in fact, when you look at the 7D Mark II, it will only do dual pixel CMOS AF at 30p, 1080 30p. It will do 60p, but you lose the dual pixel CMOS AF. Now, they've resolved that on the 80D, but not on the 7D Mark II, which is really the competition for this. And you have to go to the latest 1DX to get 4K from Canon. Well, I'm pleased to say Nikon have put 4K video into the D500, and it's very, very, very good quality. What they do is they take a 1-to-1 crop from the middle of the sensor. So they're taking a crop, an ultra-high definition crop, which is, 3840 by 2160 pixels. They crop that from the middle of that 20 megapixel image. There's no wire or scaling artifacts to worry about. It looks really, really good. The downside to that is that taking a UHD crop from the 20 megapixel area is quite a severe crop. It's almost 1.5 times, unless we forget the DX sensor is already a 1.5 times field reduction compared to full frame. So you got 1.5 times 1.5 times, which is about 2.25 times. So if you're using a wide angle, what you thought was a wide angle lens, it's suddenly becoming more like a standard lens. So you're not going to be shooting ultra wide angle in 4K with this camera, unless you've got a ridiculously wide lens like a fisheye or, So bear that in mind, but the quality is very good. You also have, as I showed you earlier, a microphone and a headphone jack. There is a flat picture control profile that turns down the sharpening and everything. So if you're into grading your footage, you can do that. You can get some pretty flat stuff out of it. You can pull focus using the touch screen, but it goes zip, 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 zip. So you will turn it off very quickly because it will drive you mad. I mean, I'm very satisfied with the video quality. Once you forget about autofocus, it'll do 1080 up to 60p as well. So yeah, the video quality is very good. It's nice to have 4K on this DSLR, because in that respect, that is in another regard where it jumps over Canon at this price point.
Very good. So, Gordon, you mentioned this camera has Wi-Fi. I know it also has NFC. It even has Bluetooth in there. So tell us a little bit more about the connectivity of the camera.
Well, the first thing to mention, this is a very, very tough body, and yet Nikon has managed to squeeze Bluetooth and Wi-Fi radios into it. I assume there is a more plasticky area on there somewhere. Maybe it comes out of the port. I don't know. But it's not compromising the integrity of this body. Lest we forget, I think I've said that before, I love that expression, lest we forget the Canon 7D Mark II does have a built-in GPS receiver in the head, but it does not have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. What camera has Bluetooth? Very, very few. What are Nikon up to? What on earth are they thinking about? Well, Bluetooth is part of their new SnapBridge technology, which kind of, I'm not sure whether it made its debut on the D500, but the D500 is certainly one of the first models to have it, and it's now also being deployed on a lot of their compact cameras, their latest compact cameras, and I think really Nikon will probably try and put it in pretty much everything they've got going forward. Now, think about how you use Wi-Fi on a typical camera, and I'm a big Wi-Fi user. Here is the OMD EM1. And the way I use Wi-Fi on this is I take a picture, I look through it, I think, oh, I like that picture, I want to share it or back it up, I want to get it on my phone. So I switch on Wi-Fi, I get my phone to switch its Wi-Fi on, or sometimes they can make each other do it, the Sonys make each other do it, I get them to turn themselves on, and then I transfer the picture over Wi-Fi, and then when it's finished, I turn off the Wi-Fi, and then I go onto my phone and I share it or back it up. It's very much a process that you consciously start, perform, and end. Okay, it's something where you stop to do it. You don't do it as you walk along. You sit down for a minute and you do it. It's a conscious operation. Now, Nikon has been thinking about this, and they thought, that's fine for some things, but it's not that convenient. What if you want to, say, back up all of your pictures or transfer all of your pictures? What if you want to tag all of your pictures with GPS coordinates. You know what? Is there a better way of doing it? And I don't know whether they came to the same conclusion that, say, Fujifilm has, or whether they looked at them. The way Fujifilm does GPS tagging is kind of similar. What they do is they established a Wi-Fi connection that stays on between models like the XT and the X Pro 2 and your phone. That Wi-Fi connection stays on for, say, 60 minutes. And during that time, if you take a picture, the camera requests the GPS coordinates from the phone and embeds them as you take the picture. There's no logging required, there's no synchronization required. It happens as you take the picture. And I think Nikon may have thought of that and thought we should do something like this, or maybe they came to their own conclusions separately. Because the way SnapBridge works is it maintains a Bluetooth link with your phone all the time, even when the camera is switched off. Now, if you're one of these people that thinks, oh, I don't like a radio using the power, I'm not going to let no radio use my power when my camera's switched off, I want it to be powered down. Well, in that case, you can. There's a menu option that says, look, when I turn off the camera, it stays off. But by default, it leaves the Bluetooth on. And this is why. It maintains this permanent Bluetooth connection with your phone. And it is constantly, when you take a picture, as soon as you take a picture, if there is an active Bluetooth connection with your phone, which there probably is because your phone's in your pocket, so it's less than a meter away from the camera anyway, it will say, "Oi, phone, can I have the GPS position?" And the phone goes, "Sure, here you go." It sends it the GPS position. It's embedded immediately. The camera also goes, "Oh, hang on, what's the time? Can I synchronize my clock with you? Because you may have gone on a holiday to a different time zone. Your camera, normally you have to change the clock on it." I never remember to do that. So when I come back from America with photos from there, they all say like 1 a.m. I think, wait a minute, that's not right. Or it's the time zone's completely wrong. Well, not anymore, because it's getting the time updated from the phone, which is of course connected to the internet, so it knows what time it is. So the camera is requesting this information from the phone, but at the same time, it can also transfer the pictures from the camera into the phone. Now, you can do this either at 2 megapixels or at the full 20 megapixel resolution. Now, Bluetooth isn't very fast, but it does have the advantage of reconnecting very, very seamlessly. Now, when I do a Wi-Fi transfer, like I said, I have to consciously sit down, make sure the devices are connected. Sometimes they don't connect. You've got to do something and make sure that they are connected, and then I transfer the image and then I switch it off. Not so with SnapBridge and Bluetooth. It just works. You connect them once at the beginning when you first get this camera, and then it just stays connected. So I don't need to worry about turning it on. But meanwhile, what's happening is I take a picture and this information is trickling back and forth between them. So I did some timings. Now, it takes about 2 seconds for the camera to request and receive GPS position. So if you take a picture and then you literally put it down and you look around and then you press play, that's long enough for it to have already requested, received, and embedded the GPS. So literally, as soon as you look at that picture on the screen, you'll see it's got a little satellite icon on it, and there are the GPS coordinates. How neat is that? If you've got it to request 2 megapixel images, let me look at my timings here, because I worked this out this morning. Takes about 10 seconds to transfer a 2 megapixel picture over Bluetooth. So imagine you've taken your picture, you put the camera down, you get your phone out your pocket, you turn it on. That's taken about 10 seconds. And the eerie thing is when you switch the phone on, the picture's there. It's already there. And you're like, oh, that's nice. I was going to have to consciously stop, switch on Wi-Fi, connect them, copy it across to share. It's already there. It's done it. Now, if you're doing 20 megapixel images, it takes somewhat longer. Over Bluetooth, looking about 3 minutes per image, which is a hell of a long time. But remember, they're trickling over. So it's happening as you're walking around town. It's happening, in between shoots. And here's the important thing. Bluetooth, the type of Bluetooth they're using is a very low power type of Bluetooth. So it's not having anywhere near the impact on your battery life as Wi-Fi does. Now, there is still Wi-Fi on the camera for if you want to transfer an image faster. And I did, again, some timings. Those 20 megapixel images, which took 3 minutes over Bluetooth, only took 6 seconds over Wi-Fi. But I had to stop. I had to activate the Wi-Fi. Although the SnapBridge app on the phone does make it quite easy, but it took quite a while to switch connections. And then, unfortunately, you go back to this older system where Nikon, infuriatingly, with the old app, it's exactly the same still on SnapBridge, where it has to load all the thumbnails. It takes ages for those thumbnails to appear, like about 30 to 60 seconds for the thumbnails to appear. And only then can you select an image. And then, of course, it copies across quickly. But in that time, the Bluetooth would have trickled it over. Now, the only time where the SnapBridge technology caught me out is there's a setting in the camera where you can say, tag the image to be transferred by SnapBridge. Now, do you want that feature on or off? I had it on. So I'm taking pictures around Brighton. They're coming across brilliantly. Then I start doing those continuous AF tests with the bird swooping down on the donut. I'm going like this. I'm taking hundreds and hundreds of pictures. And of course, all of them have got this setting which says, please transfer them to my phone over SnapBridge. They're all tagged transfer. So for ages, it was trickling along. I was like, oh, there's another picture of a bird. There's a donut. There's another picture of a bird. There's another picture of a bird. So if you are going to be taking large bursts, you may want to turn that feature off in the camera and then turn it back on again. You can go into playback and deselect them all. You can say, actually, I want to deselect everything I've just, so that they don't automatically transfer. But that's the only time I got caught out. But the interesting thing for me, and I'm sorry that this has gone on for ages, but the interesting thing for me is that the Wi-Fi took so long to kind of establish and work that it really offered no speed advantage over SnapBridge. We're using Bluetooth. And although the Bluetooth was slow, it was this constant trickle where it was taking place without me asking for it to take place. And so the pictures were on my phone and they were tagged after just a few seconds. And it was just nice that they were ready. What do you think about that? Have I explained it okay?
Well, yeah, no, I think so. I am not a big user of Wi-Fi from the camera. Where I use it is with my Leica Q. Of all cameras, you wouldn't think that's to be the one, but the Leica app and interface makes it very nice. It's very fast, very responsive. So I do transfer. It's also at the end of the day, when I want to look at the images before I get home, it's a very fast way to look at the image, just to review them on the phone, because the display on my, my big, whatever it is, the iPhone 6 Plus, whatever they call it, with the big screen I have, very nice way to look at the images. But I'll be very interested when you've had even more time to work with this camera to read about your experience with the battery life, particularly in that setting. And
what I want to show you here is this is a picture that I took on the South Downs National Park yesterday. And you can see, I've gone for the kind of thumbnail view with a histogram. You can see the little GPS. Oh, it's gone off. I knew I should have changed my timings. You can see the little GPS icon
right
there.
In the center there.
That says that there is some, it's received that information. If I go to this different page view, there you can actually see the coordinates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's great. However, if I go through it, no, I go the other way. Look how I use the touch screen. So that got the GPS. You see the icon there, the GPS icon? That got it. That got it. That got it. That didn't get it. That didn't get it. That didn't get it. Now, why not? As far as I was concerned as a photographer, the conditions had not changed. They were taken seconds apart. The phone was on. The Bluetooth was on. SnapBridge was enabled. The phone was in my pocket for all of those. Why were some of them tagged, but some of them weren't? So I want to do some more tests into this. I think it's a new technology that isn't completely 100% rock solid yet. When it's working, it works brilliantly. When it's not, sometimes it doesn't, mysteriously. Now, the weird thing about that is that those pictures were still automatically tagged and they still trickled onto my phone. That was fine. But I had the option for all of them to be tagged with the GPS position, and yet only half of them were. I'm not sure why that didn't happen. I'm going to look into that more, and if I find out, I'll update my review at cameralabs.com. So if that's important to you, and again, the fact that Canon has a built-in GPS hardware receiver in the head, it's kind of, if the GPS position is of critical importance, then that might be a better solution for you. And Nikon do a separate GPS module if you want that sort of thing. But once they get SnapBridge working really well, seamlessly, I think it's really nice. The thing not to do is what I did, which is to time it, just because I'm a former PC journalist. I want to know how fast it's working, because you don't have to worry about how fast it's working because it's happening without you having to do anything. That's the clever thing about it. If it's Wi-Fi, you are interested in the speed of it because you had to turn it on. You've got to wait for it to complete. You had to request the process. But with Bluetooth and this always on connection, this low power trickling of data, even though it's slow, much slower than Wi-Fi, the end result of you getting your picture on your phone or it GPS tag could actually be faster and more convenient. So even though some reviewers reports that I've read so far are not that impressed with SnapBridge, I am. I actually really like it. And I think it does something that no one else's cameras do. I should, however, say that the SnapBridge app does let you on your phone remote control the camera, but it's no different to the older Nikon Wi-Fi control, in which case you see a live view on your phone, you can press a button to take the picture, you can tap to reposition the AF area, but that's it. There is no exposure control, there's no adjusting white balance or quality settings or anything like that. So in that respect, the remote control is still sadly very, very, very basic compared to what you get from Sony, Olympus, Panasonic, Fujifilm, Canon, anyone. It's very, very basic remote control. But I do like this GPS tagging and this trickling of photos being sent to your phone. Oh, and I should add that Nikon also offer a kind of upload option where once it's on your phone, it can then be uploaded to Nikon's own web servers for backup. Again, this is all happening seamlessly, and they give you lots of space to get started on that service as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my experience, I love having my images tagged because I use Lightroom and I bring them up in the map module and I get to see where everything was. And I often want to go back and say exactly where was I standing at the moment I took that picture. I used to, in the days when I shot Nikon, I had the external adapter. It was quite pricey. It was $200 or something like that, US. And the problem with that was that it really taxed the battery. It drained the battery very, very quickly. So I'm glad to hear that there are more and more solutions that make use of a mobile phone because at least my mobile phone, I can run GPS tracking all day on my phone and I still have battery left at the end of the day. So I think this is a good solution.
Now, I also wanted to, before I forget, demonstrate the 10 frames per second, because people like to hear that stuff. My microphone...
You've already done that.
No, actually hear it going.
No, you went... I heard that earlier.
Okay, well, let's compare them. This is me doing it. This is it doing it. Gordon, camera. What do you think?
I think it's pretty close. Pretty close.
Did you hear it? That's lovely, isn't it? 10 frames per second, and it doesn't fill up. You just keep shooting. However, if you've got SnapBridge turned on, oh no! It's going to start transferring all those pictures to my phone. Did I deselect it? I've turned my phone off. And before I turn my phone on, because I know as soon as I turn my phone on, it's going to go, oh, hi, phone, over Bluetooth. Let's start trickling them over. And I'm going to deselect all of those, because at the moment I have it selected to send everything. You can turn that off. You don't have to do that. You can do it, individually. But because I like the technology, I've got it turned on. So now I'm going to have to deselect all those images. I wish I'd not put a memory card in there now.
Very good. Well, luckily the film is cheap, right?
Yes.
Not much for processing. Well, very good, Gordon. I want to look at some of the competitors here, and we had a problem figuring out who the competitors were for this because again, at $2,400 US for the body only. It is one of the priciest APS-C crop sensor cameras that's out there. Other ones to consider, there's Nikon's own D610, which right now is $1,500 US, substantially less expensive. And I'm sorry, the 610 is a full frame camera. Big mistake there. So let me stick with the crop sensor cameras. The 7200. Just a touch over $1,000. You've got things like the Fuji X-T1 at $1,300. Of course, the Canon 7D Mark II we've spoken about, $1,500, which is probably the closest competitor. And as we've said, the Canon 7D, if you don't need 4K video, is probably a better choice for video if you're satisfied with 1080p. You've got the Lumix GH4, great camera, $1,300. So, or even the A7 Mark II from Sony, which has the in-body image stabilization now, $1,700. So it's an interesting position to be up there. If you look at full-frame cameras in the Nikon line, as I mentioned, you've got the D610 at only $1,500, not fully weather-sealed, not a really professional camera, but a very nice camera. The D810, marvelous full-frame camera, $2,800. It's only $400 more than this camera. So it'll be interesting to talk about that. How would you compare this to the D810?
Well, they're designed to do different things. They're completely different things. It's like, it's okay to not all jackets or hats have to be the same. They can perform for different environments. This is, I should say that the image quality on this is fantastic. For APS-C, I can't think of many cameras that will beat it. It's beautiful resolution, color, rendition, dynamic range. I have no complaints. They're beautiful looking pictures. But this camera is really, for me, all about the 10 frames per second and the continuous autofocusing and the tough build. This camera is designed to be as confident as you can get for sports and wildlife without going to a D5. Now, in terms of alternatives, I was speaking to some of my friends who are professional sports photographers and shoot Nikon. They said, well, one of your alternatives to this is to get something like a secondhand D4 or D4S. If you want that big grip that's already on it, the advantage of being able to shoot full frame, which gives you access to some very high-end wide-angle lenses. Now, as a DX body, when you want to shoot wide with this, you've got to use a DX format lens. And in the same way as Canon with its EFS lenses, there's no truly kind of high-end, very bright, rock solid, bulletproof. There's no high-end DX lenses in terms of build quality and everything as there are in the full frame lineup. It's different kind of, it's pitched in a slightly different way. Now, if you're shooting telephoto, it doesn't matter. You just get one of their professional grade telephoto lenses and then you're happy. But if you are shooting action that comes really close, like a cyclist just about to go right past you and you want a nice wide angle shot of that, then a second-hand full frame body like a D4 might be better for you. But if you're shooting long telephotos, then this suddenly becomes a very compelling option. I'd like to just briefly compare it to this EOS 7D Mark II because they really are arguably the closest. They're high-end APS-C DSLRs that are aimed for sports shooting. And they have a few things in common. They both shoot 20 megapixels. They both shoot at 10 frames per second. They both have headphone and microphone jacks. But beyond that, there's quite a few differences, and most of them are in the favor of the D500, which again is a year and a half newer, so it should have more on it. It's got a deeper buffer, as long as you're using XQD memory cards. The AF system, as I've mentioned before, is broader, it's denser, it's more sensitive, and arguably the 3D tracking is better than what Canon has. Although, to be honest, if you had a 7D Mark II, you're not going to go the autofocus is rubbish because it is very good. But arguably the Nikon AF system is better, and you've got that broader AF area that's more sensitive in dimmer light. The screen is bigger, it's high resolution, it's touch sensitive and articulated. So the screen is better than on the Canon. It shoots 4K movies. Canon's only 1080p. It's got 9-frame AEB. The Canon's only 7-frame. The thing that Canon has on its side is dual pixel CMOS AF. The fact that it can autofocus during live viewing movies quietly, quickly, and confidently. So there's no hunting. You don't hear it focusing. It just works really well. It will only do it at 1080 30p. It doesn't have the 4K, but if you're going to be continuously autofocusing for movies, it is the preferable choice. And for me, that makes it a much more practical kind of event camera. And I've seen people use the 7D Mark II in events like weddings, for example. They're shooting weddings, beautiful stills, very fast autofocus, but then they see an opportunity to film video. They can switch it to video and they know it will autofocus perfectly, even with the bride and groom walking towards them with a shallow depth of field lens. I've done it in a church and they come towards you and it stays in focus, no problem. You're not going to be doing that with this. Yes, you're shooting in 4K, but you're not going to get that continuous autofocus performance. So that's really, for me, where they differ. But in terms of I keep going back to the AF module on this, that is just so confident. It just works so well. And it is nice to have the 4K video, and it does have the SnapBridge. Remember, the 7D Mark II doesn't even have Wi-Fi. It has GPS hardware, but it doesn't even have Wi-Fi, so you're not going to be copying your images off it onto your phone anywhere near as easily as you can with this. So they're the ones, really. They're the ones that you're going to be weighing up. I mean, in the mirrorless world, Sony's a6300 is interesting because it has an AF area that covers the whole frame, just about. It's phase detect. It does work well. What I found with most mirrorless cameras is they're not so good when the subject is distant. You've really got to let it get to a sufficient size on the frame for the AF area system to really lock onto it. Once it does lock onto it, you're laughing. It works. At that point, your biggest worry with mirrorless is the viewfinder lag. But in terms of autofocus and continuous shooting, they models like the A6300 are doing really well at half the price. But the thing I found when shooting with the D500 is that it doesn't care how far away the subject is or how small it is. If you can get an AF point on it, it's game over for that subject because it's in focus. It's just working. If you can get it on the frame, it's done it. It's so easy to get shots of things moving quickly with this camera, whereas you've got to employ a few little tricks. You've got to think about it a bit more with things like the A6300. But again, that's a camera that's half the price. It's a fraction of the size and weight. Pros and cons to all of them.
Bottom line, who do you think is going to spend $2,400 for an APS-C camera? Who's going to buy this camera?
Okay, I think sports and wildlife photographers is who it's really for. And it's interesting to see, because you could see the writing on the wall a few years ago with high-end DSLRs, is that for a while, you could buy a D300 simply because you wanted a good all-round camera. Yes, it also was great for sports and wildlife, but it was a nice all-round camera. But then lots of other nice all-round cameras, like, the OMD M1 came out. It's not as good for sports, but it is a gorgeous all-round camera. So suddenly these high-end DSLRs found themselves, in my view, in a kind of increasingly niche position where they're still unparalleled for sports and wildlife shooting, especially at the telephoto end of things. So I would say sports and wildlife shooters, bird photographers, are going to love the D500, especially if they've got, I mean, if you've got a D300S, this is such an epic upgrade in every respect, 6.5 years, and a lot of them were waiting as well. I'm not going for a D7000. It doesn't have this, this, and this. And then I was like, yeah. It's never going to happen. They're never going to do. There's not going to be a replacement. And yet here it is. It did actually happen. So if you're a D300S owner, you're going to love it. If you're a D7000 series owner and you want to step up, great step up, in terms of speed, build quality, those sort of features, connectivity, that's what it's really going to give you. For everyone else, it's still a lovely camera and it takes fantastic photos, but you'll be able to match the quality at a significantly lower price, where this camera will outperform other cameras is with the autofocus, the continuous shooting, the build quality, the things that pro sports and high-end wildlife photographers really look out for. And they're gonna love it. And I'm really pleased that Nikon has, joined in that market again, because they've left it to Canon for 2 generations now. And it'll also be interesting to see how Canon respond. Are they going to do a 7D Mark III?
And we should also point out another advantage of this camera, particularly for wildlife, but to some extent for sports as well. And that's the concept of using a crop sensor, the 1.5x crop factor. So if you put that 70 to 200 lens on this camera, it's the equivalent crop-wise of having a whatever it is, 135 to 300 on the full frame. And it's even better because if you compare it in terms of the resolution, if you want to do it that way, this is the equivalent of about a 36 megapixel image on a full frame. I'm doing the math a little funny there, but the fact is that you can get the effect of a longer focal length and still have a very high quality image. I expect that you're going to see hundreds of these at the Summer Olympics this year.
Definitely. You're going to see a D5 over one shoulder and you're going to see a D500 over the other shoulder.
Well, I think what you'll see is the pro guys who show up with, half a dozen cameras and they pre-position them and they trigger them remotely. This is going to be one of the cameras of choice for that because it's just ideal. It's less expensive. You can afford to come out with a lot of them. I expect Nikon will seed the Olympics with many of them to make it very available to those people who have passes to shoot the Olympics.
Yeah. Now, looking again at mirrorless, the interesting thing, a couple of features that I've become used to on mirrorless that aren't on this. There is no completely silent shutter. I'll show you the silent shutter, right? This is the normal shutter. Hear that?
Yep.
That's the normal shutter. Now I'm going to give you the silent shutter. So that's the Q for quiet mode.
Yeah. All they do is they delay the return of the mirror is what they do.
So it's quieter, but it's not really silent, is it? Whereas you do get proper electronic shutters on most mirrorless cameras now that are completely silent. You don't get that. You don't get focus peaking on it. Now, I don't know if this is because Sony and Panasonic have got some sort of intellectual property copyright on it. I don't know why, but you don't get it on these Nikon cameras, which is frustrating because you will almost certainly be doing manual focus for your movies, and at 4K that's pretty unforgiving resolution. So it's a shame it doesn't have focus peaking. And again, the Wi-Fi remote control gives you no control over the exposure, which is very basic compared to the competition. So if any of those are important to you, you may want to think more carefully about it. But, if you're a sports or wildlife shooter, I think you will be extremely happy with the D500.
All right. Excellent, Gordon. Another terrific review. I want to thank you for joining me once again. It's always a pleasure to see you. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening, and encourage you to go to cameralabs.com, because by the time this video is live, Gordon probably will have finished his review. We caught him halfway through on this one, and he did a really good job. You tested the most important things, but we'll dot the I's and cross the T's in the written review. Again, cameralabs.com, and if you're interested in purchasing the D500 or anything else that we review here on All About the Gear, again, head on over to cameralabs.com and click on the Buy Now links. Gordon, we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Doug. It's always a pleasure to see you.
And everyone else, we'll see you next time as well on All About the Gear.